when Star Wars came out, everybody said, "Oh, it's a silly movie. It's just a bunch of space battles and stuff. It's not real. There's nothing behind it." And I said, "Well, there is stuff behind it. It's not just a space battle. There's more to it than that. It's much, much more complicated than that." But nobody would listen. So they just said, "Oh, well, it's simple, and we like the spaceships. We like the stuff."
All right, in this episode, we'll deal with, I think, probably one of the most controversial characters in the Star Wars canon, which is, of course, Qui-Gon Jinn. Now, why Qui-Gon Jinn is so controversial is basically he's very boring and stoic. He's one-dimensional. But insofar as he is a character, he's a little confusing because at times he does things that are very morally ambiguous or even outright evil. And, well, that's a plot problem or that's a plot contradiction or et cetera, et cetera. And they try to make fun of that. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's pretty obvious, especially with Attack of the Clones, that we do see that Jedi are of differing values. They are in a continuum. Some are on the more light side, which Qui-Gon is, and some are more on the dark side, like Dooku. But even within the light, you can have people who are different shades. And I think Qui-Gon is not a dark Jedi, but he's very much on a knife's edge in terms of what he does in the Phantom Menace. So we're gonna hear them try to make fun of him in Watto, and I think the joke fails itself. But even the substance of it is not very important to us. We'll see if they make their case or not.
Like the most common sense approach to everything, Qui-Gon concocts some kind of convoluted scheme so that we could get to the pod race. I honestly still don't understand it.
My ship will be the entry fee.
What would the boy ride? He smashed up my pod in the last race.
Well, I have acquired a pod in a game of chance.
So, you supply the pod and the entry fee.
If it's going to be 50-50, I suggest you front the cash for the entry.
I supply the boy. We split the winnings 50-50, I think, huh?
You keep all the winnings minus the cost of the parts in the end.
So, you supply the pod.
We lose. You keep my ship.
Who was betting what? Then it gets more complicated later, when the bet changes.
I'll take that bet. I'll wager my new racing pod against, say,
Well,
the boy and his mother.
your pod is worth 2 slaves.
The boy then.
So Anakin built the pod, but Watto didn't know that he built the pod, so that he raced with Watto's pod. So then Anakin tells Qui-Gon, if Watto wins, Anakin tells Qui-Gon to pretend that it's his pod. And Watto says, I'm gonna put up the entry fee if you let me use your pod. If they win, then the boy they get the money for the part, but if they lose, then Watto keeps the pod and the boy. Qui-Gon would have to pay back the Republic credits. Oh wait, no, he bet the ship. He bet the ship, and then if he loses the pod race, then Watto gets the ship in exchange for putting up the entry. Qui-Gon wins, then he gets the prize money. But then later on they throw the boy actually into the deal. First it's the ship versus the pod, and the mom and the bet. So then if Watto wins, I don't know. If Qui-Gon...
I lost everything.
Whenever you gamble, my friend, eventually you lose.
Okay, so the gist of it, I guess, is that the bargain was really, really complicated. I just don't think that's true. I think it's pretty obvious. He was just hustling Watto to get the part, and he was feigning that Anakin is of no value, but clearly he wants Anakin, and he just really did a good job of goading Watto to be a racist and sort of devalue humans and said, oh, well, he's worthless. It's like, okay, well, then you don't mind losing him. And they put it up to a bet, and he could manipulate the bet. So I don't see any big complication here at all, really. I don't think any plot issues are here. But the major issue they bring up is, well, isn't this kind of weird that a Jedi would do this? Yeah, that's the point. That's literally one of the major messages of the prequels are that the Jedi are radically flawed. And in their own sense, they're their worst enemies, and that they're passing a sort of a necessary thing that has to happen. And now, you can dislike the prequels, you can like the prequels, but even if you don't like them, that is one of the major coded messages within the trilogy. This is something that Lucas has confirmed in news interviews, saying, well, I don't get it. It seems like the Jedi are coming off pretty badly. And the answer is, yeah, that was the point. That's the way they're constructed. He just wasn't being super obvious about it. But I think if you read the scenes with Qui-Gon, his dialogue carefully, it's very explicit. I mean, Obi-Wan says this, that he's not following the rules of the Jedi Council. He's following the living will, or what he calls the living will, and he's more attuned to the present, and he thinks that's more important. But he's willing to do some things that seem, quote, not on the light side, right? He's willing to do some things that are very nasty and horrific. I mean, Watto is devastated by that betting. He comes in totally poor as a result of it. But it's sort of his own self-destruction. But in other places, like where he does a mind trick on Boss Nass and he really manipulates people, yeah, that seems really, really evil. But again, for him, it's a necessary thing because the Force is telling him to do these things, and in his own judgment, it's an unfortunate necessity to lie and deceit and cheat in various places, but he's doing it for the right reasons. His issue with the Council is that they're just caring about themselves. They've become kind of like this stale bureaucracy. They only care about their own self-promotion and protecting their place in the galaxy and in the Republic, and he thinks that's not our goal. Our goal is to follow the Force and the teachings of the Force. Our goal is not to have a safe and secure place in the Senate just because that's where we're getting our money from or we're getting political favors from the Chancellor. That's not the point of the Jedi. So, again, if you don't like The Phantom Menace, that is fine. You can perfectly get at its flaws. There are genuine flaws in there, and if you think that those flaws are critical enough, that's also fine. And it's not going to work for you. But I think Qui-Gon Jinn's characterization, I admit, is odd because, again, what his intentions are not immediately apparent. But once you see what is going on in Phantom Menace, not just with the prequels, but with the larger story, that's the point. The Jedi as constructed are too dogmatic. They're just way too focused on their own rules. And I think it's actually pretty clever when you think about it. The Trade Federation and the Jedi are set up in a really interesting parallel fashion that they're following their own kind of organizational logic, but it's self-destructive. That's the point of the prequels. All these organizations are looking out for themselves, and they're not doing what's good for everyone. So it's not that they're breaking the rules, but that they're breaking the rules for a larger ideology that makes no sense, and they need some way to balance out their interests and their passions. And Qui-Gon is not the perfect example. He's flawed as well. That's why he dies. Symbolically, he's not, quote, the best resolution to this, but he knows something is wrong, and that's, I think, what symbolically and thematically he represents. He's not Dark Jedi, but he's very close. I guess you'd call him a gray Jedi, and that's, I think, what Luke represents in the original trilogy, like this synthesis of what is good and bad in the Jedi and a synthesis of what is good and bad in the Sith. But again, we can argue over it, but I see no major issue with what happened with him and Watto. I think they're just, scrounging for jokes, and the joke is not, to me, particularly effective. But again, if they had deeper criticism of Qui-Gon, we could have a conversation, but they don't. It's a very simple attack. He's just boring, and he does stuff which is morally questionable. And the answer is, yeah, that's definitely there, but that's the point. It wasn't an overlook or a mistake by George. That was very intentionally, and that's by the design of the prequels. All right, we're gonna keep listening to RLM, and hopefully they're gonna make better points than this. But he is very controversial, I admit. But I think it's only if you're not paying attention to all the clues that George is setting out. Once those clues are looked at more carefully, I think Qui-Gon becomes less of a mysterious character, but still a very difficult paradox to solve. All right, it's been Star Wars Analyzed on RLM's very questionable joke on Qui-Gon and Watto. Thanks for listening. If you like the content, please hit the like button and/or subscribe. Please comment below. It helps the channel. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.